Hi guys, welcome back. So this evening I am going to make some more tiger bread for the freezer for packed lunches and things for this week. So the recipe that I'm going to make is for tiger bread, and there are two things that make tiger bread special. One is the sesame oil. So I get this sesame oil from Aldi, but you can get sesame oil in most supermarkets because it's used a lot in stir fries and oriental cooking. So you could look out for it with sort of stir fry sauces and soy sauce and things like that. It could be there, or it could be with the olive oil and vinegars and things. In Aldi this is with the other oils and vinegars. The other thing that makes tiger bread special is the rice flour. So this rice flour is from Dove's Farm. I can't remember which supermarket I got it from, but if you can't find rice flour, you can actually make rice flour if you have an electric grinder by grinding rice. If you can't find rice flour, you could obviously make your own as well. The recipe calls for 500 grams of plain flour, 7 grams of easy bake yeast. So I've got this Alison Easy Bake yeast. You can also get it in little sachets in a cardboard box, and the sachets are usually 7 grams. So most bread recipes which will call for yeast will call for 7 grams of yeast because that's the size most sachets come in. So 7 grams of Easy Bake yeast, 1.5 teaspoons of brown sugar. You could use caster sugar or brown sugar. I'm using brown sugar because I have it and I don't have caster sugar at the moment. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I'm just using table salt, but you could grind Himalayan salt or something like that if you wanted to get a bit more mineral content. 1 tablespoon of the sesame oil and 300 millilitres of water. So this is for the dough recipe. Once we make up the dough, we will form our loaves, and then we will cover the loaves in the rice paste. So for the rice paste, it is 3.5 grams of Easy Bake yeast, which is half a 7 gram sachet if you're using sachets, 0.5 teaspoons of brown sugar and 0.5 teaspoons of sesame oil, a pinch of salt, 75 grams of rice flour, or as I said, you can grind your own from just normal rice, and 6 tablespoons of warm water. Now, the reason that you want the water in the rice paste to be warm is because you want it to prove very quickly. So you make up the rice paste 10 minutes before applying it to the outside of your loaves, and you apply it to the outside of your loaves once your loaves have proved again in loaf form. So we're going to make up our bread dough, knead it, leave it to rise for half an hour to an hour against the radiator in the kitchen. So I actually balance my dough bowl on top of the dustbin right up against the kitchen radiator, and it sits quite happily up there where it's nice and warm. I have the top from my IKEA mixing bowl, so I've got 2 different sizes of mixing bowl that both come with these pop tops, and that means you don't have to use cling film or a wax wrap or anything like that to cover the top when your dough is proving. It's got this little pop vent section in the middle which you can open, because while your dough is proving it needs oxygen in order for the yeast to help as a raising agent. So I top the top off this. If you were using a wax wrap, it's probably breathable enough. The other thing you can do is to pop a lid from a frying pan or a casserole dish, or even a plate, like a dinner plate, over the top of your bowl. So you will want to prop it somewhat so that there is some airflow, some circulation, so that the dough can actually breathe and rise. Once we've let it rise for 30 minutes, we'll bring it back, we'll knock it back, and we'll put it back in the bowl, and we'll rise it for a second time. After that, we'll bring it back, we will knock it back, and we will shape it into our loaves. In this case, I'm doing 1 loaf from 1 ball of dough, so I don't really have to do much in the way of shaping, but I will form it into a long oval essentially, and I'll tuck it all under and make sure that it's nice and smooth. every time that I knock back the ball or finish kneading the ball and put it to prove, I will coat it with a layer of sesame oil to stop the outside from forming a hard crust. We want the dough to be elastic and soft all the way through. We don't want any sort of weird hard bits. So covering it in a layer of olive oil, or in this case with tiger bread sesame oil, gives it the ability to breathe and to expand with the elasticity and things, but provides a sort of moisture barrier and an air barrier to prevent drying out of the dough from the outside environment. Once the dough has been formed into the loaves, we will then cover it with the rice paste once it's finished proving for the third time in loaf form. So you're probably going to want to leave 3 half-hour proving windows minimum, and then you need to prepare the rice paste at least 10 minutes before you want to put your loaves in the oven, because you'll prepare the rice paste and you'll let it expand, and it will become really spongy and thick, and you will have to then spread it over the outside of your loaf directly before putting it into the oven. So you'll need to give it 10 minutes to sort of form that thick and spongy consistency. So that's basically it. It then goes in the oven and it cooks for 35 minutes on 100, and when you take it out of the oven, with your oven glove on or whatever to protect your hand, you turn the loaf upside down and you knock on the bottom, and when it sounds hollow, you know that it's risen enough. If it doesn't quite sound hollow, it's probably too dense and it probably needs to cook for a bit longer, because it's sort of doughy still inside rather than fluffy and light. So that's basically how we're going to make tiger bread. I'm going to position you up looking down on the table as I weigh out and make the ingredients, and I will then talk you through the kneading process and the kind of consistency you want before you set it to rise for the first time. So let's get started. So now I am going to start kneading the dough properly, and I want to talk you through my technique. I just need to move the mic. So the stage we're at now is we've basically got a ball of dough, and the act of kneading is basically stretching the gluten fibres in the dough. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold and push down with the heel of our hand, stretching it away from us, and then we're going to do the same in the opposite direction, and that's basically what we're going to do, is just be stretching out the fibres and turning and stretching. This also works out any sort of inconsistent spreading of the ingredients in the dough. So for example, when we put in the tablespoons of sugar, when you first start forming the dough, you might hit clumps of sugar. So this process also makes sure that everything is combined evenly. But the main purpose of it is to make the fibres nice and stretchy. And the stretchier the fibres, the better your bread will rise. So this process of stretching will make it more light and fluffy as an end result bread. So the consistency that you're going for is very smooth but not sticky and tacky, so you should be able to touch it and come away completely free of dough. It shouldn't be sticky, but it should be really smooth. So at the moment this is still quite a rough texture, so it needs to be worked some more. So at the moment you can see it's tearing when I push it, which means it still needs to be worked. It's just constantly ripping rather than stretching. So when you're kneading dough, it really helps to have it on a work surface that's low enough down that you can use your whole body weight bearing down over the top of it, rather than trying to do it pushed out in front of you where you can't use your own body weight. This is also a really good workout. So, you know, if you're doing days at the gym where you do like legs one day and arms another day and core another day, this is a really good arms workout. So as you can see, this is beginning to stretch more and tear less. It's still not there, but it's beginning to just stretch. So now I'm going to roll it up and form it into a ball. By pushing it underneath constantly, and give it a bit of a roll, and you can see at the bottom here where those bits that you're pushing underneath join, you've got a little opening. And you roll it around, and then we're going to take it again and we're going to push down, and as you can see now, it stretches. It does rip a little bit, but the consistency is very different, and I can put my fingers in and, you know, prod it and poke it and so on, and you can see the stretchiness of it as it stretches and contracts with the shaping. But you can also see that this is not sticky. It's not sticking to the table, it's not sticking to my hand. It's very soft, and it feels very, very soft and smooth. So that's basically the point you want it to be at when you stop kneading. So again, roll it around a bit, and then you're going to start to shape the dough into a nice smooth outer shell. Okay, so now we have got a surface that is relatively smooth. There's no giant pock marks or anything like that that are likely to form a hard edge or a hard crust. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our bowl and we're going to pop it into the bowl, grab a bit of whichever oil you're using. In the case of tiger bread, we're talking about sesame oil, and we're going to absolutely cover this ball, making sure to get down right to those bottom corners, and make sure that the whole ball of dough has got a nice protective layer of oil over it. I'm going to take my lid, pop it on with this slightly off so that I've got a vent for the oxygen, and I'm going to go and put this to prove for about half an hour. Okay, so the ball of dough has been proving for about half an hour, so I'm going to take it out now and knock it back. So you basically leave it to about double in size. You can see this is a lot wider. I'll take it out, and I'm just basically going to punch it back about 5 times and then form it back into a ball. Okay, so as you can see, that's nice and smooth again. There's no obvious air pockets as I'm moving it, so that's sort of nicely tightly down on the bottom as well. So I'm going to pop that back in, and again I am going to oil the ball of dough. Okay, and now I'm going to set it to proof again for another half hour. Okay, so this has been left to proof for a second time and double in size again. So I'm now going to knock it back and form it into a loaf shape and put it on the baking tray. So the baking tray is lined with a silicone mat, and I then have a damp, clean dishcloth which I'm going to put over the loaf as it proofs for the final time in the loaf shape. So I am going to put a bit more oil on the outside. This will stop it from forming a hard skin and sort of bursting as it grows, and will allow it to just stretch and grow nice and evenly. So now I'm going to take my clean wet dishcloth and lay that over the top. Now the primary purpose of this is really just to stop dust particles or whatever from landing on the bread while it's proving for the final time. Obviously it's not going to stop air getting to the bread, which is what the layer of olive oil is for. This is just really as a dust protection. So I'm going to go and place this in my warm spot in the kitchen where it's going to prove for the final time. So I'm going to leave this to prove for 20 minutes, and at that point I will start making up my rice paste. Then I will leave the rice paste to prove for 10 minutes while this proves for a further 10 minutes. And then I will add the rice paste to the outside of my loaf shape. So I will see you in a bit. So for the final step of our tiger bread recipe, we are going to make the rice paste, which we will cover the outside of the loaf in, and this is what cracks apart and gives it its tiger stripe appearance. I think it actually looks a bit more like giraffe spots, but it's called tiger bread because supposedly it looks like tiger stripes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same bowl that I've been using for my dough. I'm going to measure out 75 grams of the rice flour, 3.5 grams of the easy bake yeast, which is exactly the amount of yeast I have left. 6 tablespoons of warm water, half a teaspoon of brown sugar, half a teaspoon of sesame oil, and a pinch of salt. I'm going to give this a nice good stir. Just going to use the back of the spoon to form this into a nice smooth paste. Okay, so I'm going to go and put that in the warm place in the kitchen for 10 minutes to prove quickly. Okay, so now we are on to the final process before baking. So the rice paste has had a chance to prove, and it has grown a bit, although it's quite difficult to tell with the rice paste. It doesn't appear to have changed much, and our loaf shape has risen again. I'm quite happy with the rise on it, but it will rise more when it's actually cooking as well. Bearing in mind that it's very cold here at the moment. So we're just going to grab some of our paste, and you can see the sort of consistency that it is. It's crumbly and it's quite spongy and crumbly. That's the consistency of it. I'm just literally going to take it and start spreading it across the surface of the loaf. Okay, so I've now covered the loaf completely in the rice paste. I had to add quite a bit of water because it turned out very thick, thicker than last time, but hopefully that will form a nice thin crust that will crack open in the way that tiger bread does. So the oven has been preheated to 200 degrees Celsius, and I'm now going to bake this for 35 minutes. So here is the finished loaf. So if I pick it up and turn it over, you can hear that when knocking it, it rings hollow. So that is our test to see if it's done. So with this batch, the rice paste layer has cracked more along sort of straight lines, more like tiger stripes, which is interesting. Comparing this to the tiger bread that I get from the professional bakers, the crust is a lot thicker, and I think that the rice paste that I've been making has been too thick. So I think I'm going to change the recipe from the recipe I originally got and add more liquid to the rice paste, and I think I'm actually going to get it so that it's so thin that I can easily sort of paint it on, rather than the faff that obviously I had to go to wet it enough to even spread it out. I think the fact that it cracks is enough. I don't think it needs to be quite so thick. Otherwise, I really like this recipe. I love tiger bread, and I do like being able to make our own, especially when it comes to doing it zero waste, because it is more expensive to purchase bread from the artisanal baker rather than from the supermarkets. And all the supermarket bread, apart from Waitrose, seems to be in plastic bags at the moment. That is set to change with all the pledges that the supermarkets are making at the moment about reducing unnecessary plastic packaging. So I will keep my fingers crossed for that. So let me know down in the comment section below what your favourite kind of bread is. I'm always on the lookout for different styles of bread to add into our meal prepping. Bread is something that I enjoy making, and it forms such a basis of our diet and what we eat, especially with packed lunches and soup and sandwiches and that sort of thing. So if you liked this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. It really does help. And if you're interested in learning more about how to live well on a small budget, then make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.